Hi, I'm starting with a deep breath today because that's the foundation for everything. It's also my way of introducing an unconventional topic and an even more incredible speaker today in Procurement Horizons. We'll be talking about creating psychological safety with yoga. Now, before you say, how's this even relevant to me if I'm not into yoga? Hear me out. It's relevant if you're open to learning and experimenting because you can increase your self awareness over time, which is what one of the five key procurement skills you want to keep growing, right? So, our guest today is super special to me. Her name is Michelle Doyle, and she's someone who wears many hats, and all of them with finesse. She's a writer published in the Globe and Mail. She was long listed for the 2020 CBC Nonfiction Prize. She's a yoga teacher, a corporate wellness speaker, and a stand up comedian. Gosh, Michelle. And apart from this, I know she used to be a marketing executive. What you'll notice today is she's definitely someone with an uncanny, humorous style of storytelling and a deep passion for her craft. So, welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Risha. I love the work you're doing, and I'm honored to be your guest today. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. A little story about how Michelle has impacted my life. I didn't consider myself a yoga person, even though I come from the land of yoga, which is India. I had tried it several times and hadn't quite taken to it. Now, Michelle changed that from the very first session itself, which was about 6 months ago. She provided this unforgettable, immersive experience which completely engaged all of my senses. As I walked out of that class, I was determined to go back. And I've been fairly consistent since then.
Yes, that's the thing. Once the door is open, right? If it calls to you, if you feel that truth, there's something in this for me. I don't necessarily understand what it is, but I know
Yeah.
I have to, the door is open to something here that I want to explore. It sounds like you and I have a similar experience in that way because it was very similar for me as well.
Okay, awesome. I would love to, share your experience and your journey, right from your marketing roles to your current roles. And what was it like, the highs and the lows?
That Oh, sure, no problem. I will never forget my first yoga class. Um, I didn't wake up one day and said, "Oh, I can't wait to go to yoga. I want to see what yoga is all about." I actually came to it out of honestly desperation. I had, unbeknownst to my coworkers, I started experiencing panic attacks, and I didn't know that that's what it was. And
Mm,
that one panic attack, I was like, "Oh, that's fine. I'm just stressed out." And
mm,
then I started having, you know, one, not just a day, but
mm,
having several a day. And by the time there was at the point, Risha, I was having 4 panic attacks a day on average. And I had become expert at hiding it. In
mm,
front of my colleagues in meetings, I was very polished. And what people didn't see is that, oh, I'll be right back. I forgot a file in my car. Back then, we had paper. We didn't have everything digitally, thank goodness, so I could get away with it.
mm,
And I was going and having full blown panic attacks. So I went to my doctor and I said, I don't know what to do. I'd like to avoid medication if I can.
mm,
Is there anything I can do to get rid of this? Because I can't live like this anymore. And my doctor, and I will be grateful to him for the rest of my life, he was originally from India as well, but he was very clear with me. And he's like, "You need to learn how to breathe." And I said, "I can breathe or I'd be dead." And he was just so calm. And he says, "You need to learn to breathe more effectively."
mm.
And he goes, "Maybe consider yoga." And I said, "I can't do yoga. I'm not flexible." And he goes, "It's just about learning to breathe."
Yeah,
I think you said something similar about not being flexible. Like,
not at
was
all.
that?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
used
but
to be quite an, yeah.
that's what I love about, hearing your story as well, is that there's so many similarities. There's obviously different narratives, but a lot of us have that. What is it that I struggle with? What is it that I'm avoiding? I didn't want to feel the tightness. I didn't know what was causing these panic attacks, but I wasn't necessarily excited to find out. I just wanted to get rid of them. But at the
Mm.
same time, we had to start somewhere. So I went into that yoga class, and I it still blows my mind that it's now over 16 years now I have been sharing this practice, and it's been the greatest thing that ever happened to me, changed my life. And in terms of the highs and the lows, where I started and where I ended, I have not had a panic attack in over 10 years. Did they go away overnight? No. No. Did I love going to yoga every single day? And in fairness, did I go every single day? No. Like I was going maybe 3 to 4 times a week. Sometimes,
Mhm.
yes, I did go 6 days a week. But what I
Mhm.
did notice is that today I only had 3 panic attacks. Wow, awesome. And then little by little, they gradually decreased. It was not overnight, but consistency was everything. That was the biggest lesson yoga has it taught me then, and that I would swear by now. It's all about patience, persistence, consistency, and just trusting the process.
Sometimes we need to be at a certain stage to accept a message that the universe is trying to teach us. And I think that that also kind of comes across in your story. I hear a lot of people, talk about anxiety, talk about stress. I haven't experienced panic attacks, but like I can imagine how stressful that would have been. And myself, I have experienced anxiety. It's just that when we talk amongst friends, we kind of normalize all these things as a
Of
part of
course.
the package. It comes with the territory. And I wasn't ready to accept that either. So you're right, having that awareness that this is not normal, this is not how you want to live. That's so important.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is the ignoring the warning signs,
Mm.
normalizing it. Oh, everybody's stressed. We weren't designed for the pace of life that we
Mm.
have. Humans were not. Even just think about, here's a question. If you tried to run modern day software on a Commodore 64,
Mhm.
like it would be laughable. Like we have to upgrade software regularly, but the thing is, our minds haven't evolved at the same pace as society. So in turn, it's like what's wrong with me? It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. It's
Mm.
But it's also embracing the fact that this is the world we live in, right? It's not about philosophizing as why it is what it is, but no, it is what it is.
Mm.
So, how can I not avoid that and not get caught in the undertow, if you will, of that anxiety? Because
Mm. Mm.
anyone listening to this, please don't make the mistake I made of just ignoring it. Oh, I
Mm.
have a lot of pressure. Oh, it's
Mm.
just the time. Like I had tons of reasons. But something as simple, and I offer this because this was kind of a door opener for me into, maybe it may help anyone listening here as well, is it's not like we can just turn that part of our mind off like a light switch. But let's say,
Mm.
yeah, you're working, it's a work day. Once an hour, set a little timer in Outlook or whatever you use. And when that little reminder comes up, maybe you're in the middle of an email, maybe you're in the middle of a phone call, that's fine.
Mm.
Take a take a moment, finish that sentence or whatever it is that you're doing, finish the conversation, whatever it is that you're on, and then pause
Mm.
and take 10 deep breaths. If that's too much, take 5.
Mm. Mm.
Take 5 deep breaths, have a sip of water, and then get back to it. And when that was first shared with me, I
Mm.
thought that was so simple that it couldn't possibly work. That in itself is a yoga practice.
Mm. Mm.
It's an opening the door to it, right? Because what's manageable, what's possible, especially if we have responsibilities in the workplace, things have to get done. You have
Mm.
responsibilities at home, but okay, what's opening the door? Deep breaths. You started with a deep breath today, right? Even for this episode, which is awesome. What if we did that for not for everything, but if we took care of ourselves in that regard, that we didn't just keep going on autopilot, straight through, to just pause. What's
Mm.
important in terms of pausing? Gosh, I
Mm.
love that we're talking about this. We haven't even gotten it onto the yoga mat yet. This is great.
It is. It always is. Like, I never thought that this would be a topic that I could talk endlessly about. And you wouldn't believe, how many people are starting to get inspired when I talk to them about yoga now. So, I mean, and I tell them that, you should see Michelle, you should see my teacher, because the way she talks, and like, yes, she changed her life and then she's changing so many of our lives. So, yeah. And you're so right about that, starting small. And like, if we keep ignoring those signs, we need something bigger. But if we start listening to those signs and doing small things, because I do yoga just once a week, that's what fits into my schedule with my work and with a 4-year-old at home, and a family. But the rest of the days I've gotten better at taking pauses, taking breaks when I'm feeling stressed. So that's been a big game changer as well in how I feel.
I love that. And even hearing that, and first of all, thank you for saying that you were inspired. But I'm inspired by I'm inspired by my students. When you're sitting there and you're managing to go to even one class a week, and you're managing your job, and you're managing your home life, and a 4-year-old. I know how difficult it is to go to a class, and I just have to deal with cats. That's awesome. And you, that's the thing, is there's no such thing as not enough. Some people it's like,
Mm.
oh, I'm not going enough. Nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
You have 24 hours in your day. If even if you invest a tiny little bit in you, that's awareness. That's,
And this is what I liked about this practice this time, that there was no pressure. There was no pressure to do it do it 6 times a week, or do it in a particular way. The way you invite us is that even if you're lying there in shavasana or child's pose, that counts as yoga. So that's freedom to me.
100%. 100%. It's still a practice. It's a moment where you are not multitasking, where you are
Yeah.
focusing on just being and breathing. That's it. That in itself is a practice. So awesome.
Yeah. So how did you, Michelle, get interested into hot yoga specifically? Was that also coming out of your trip to India, or did that happen later? I'm also curious to learn about that.
Well, the heat, yeah, India definitely opened the door because I had practiced yoga here,
Hmm.
here in Canada for a few years, and then I went to India, and it was much hotter. And what I noticed right away is when it is hotter, I had to breathe deeper. And my muscles were a little more pliable. For perspective here, I was sitting at a desk sometimes minimum 8 to 10 hours a day. I played ice hockey. I didn't stretch very much. I couldn't touch my toes without bending my knees. I couldn't even touch my knees without bending my knees. So to practice in India and have that, oh, wow, like I can move a lot more, but I have to breathe deeper. I had no choice but to slow down. That's what really drew me to hot yoga, is because I could not power my way through it. I could not force my way through it. I had no other choice but to breathe deeper.
Okay, got it. Love the India connection, all the transformation that happened as a result of your trip. I always wonder why I didn't learn those lessons in India, but at least I get them now. So I'm really happy about that. And that slowing down is such an important lesson. There's no timing for it. And just, yeah, being patient with yourself. I think it doesn't come easy to everyone. So what would be your advice, to people who are constantly being hard on themselves and who find it very difficult to be patient with themselves?
Well, you opened the door to it right with what you just said. When it's difficult, when it doesn't come naturally, I don't know about you, but I have very high expectations of myself, and they're not very realistic. And it's the not enough syndrome kicking in sometimes. But to be candid, what really was helpful for me was noticing that I had to be kinder to myself, because what happened is I started to get some really nasty injuries through yoga. Now, that's not to scare anyone off, but what worked for me as a woman working in a predominantly male dominated business, which
Mhm.
was sports, I had to carry myself a certain way with a certain level of, I'll say ego, but also force to be taken seriously. And I played in particular ice hockey, which I was playing several times a week because I absolutely loved it. But
Mhm.
it required a certain push, forcing. And what happened is I realized it completely turned against me. I started to get injured.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, okay, what's going on here? So it's one of those things that if you don't just kind of pause and say, okay, am I working with myself?
Mhm.
Am I doing what is possible today? Or
Mhm.
am I trying to make this what I think it should be?
Mhm.
It's to meet yourself where you are. And it's hard. I'm just saying, let the ego get out of the way. It's not that simple. Let's be honest. We all know that. But it's
Mhm.
to practice, okay, how can I work with where I am and work from that space without forcing it? Easier said than done. But that's what taught me the biggest lessons was, okay, I have to just kind of work with where I am and
Mhm.
stay with it.
Yeah.
and I was thinking how to finish that sentence, but it's just, that's the thing is every day it changes because life changes, right?
Mm. Mm.
Did that answer your question? I kind of,
It does. I'm also natural inclination for me is to be hard on myself, and I'm still learning how not to be that. So yeah, a lot of things that you say, the resistance is not in the environment; it's in you. First time I heard it, I was like, no, what is that, and why didn't I think of this before? So I think that was helpful for me to just notice what I was feeling, and then things like 1 second longer being in a pose when it's
oh,
difficult,
yes.
how that's helping with being less reactive, trying to enjoy the process of where you are today, and be okay with being called out on mistakes, which I absolutely admire. Like, it's not just we're there, we're enjoying it's tough. So I like that, you're also thinking about how we are doing things, how we are like the face you talk about, put some ease on your face, that contributes to getting over that shame that we're not good at this today. But hey, that doesn't stop us from enjoying it. And
Yeah,
to
and
me,
Risha,
that's
you
what
know, you
adds
made a point
diversity.
there that just completely brought me back to India. That was when I just say like a change in my yoga
Mm.
practice, but a change in my life was, I will never forget being in a class. It was one of the first classes I was there, and just being really irritated by someone else's behavior. Just the way they were breathing was getting on my nerves, to tell you the truth. And so I got up and I went to leave, and the teacher came up to me and he's like, "Are you ill? Is everything okay?" And I was almost on the verge of tears because I was very angry. I said, I can't deal with this. And he took a deep breath and he said, "What else are you running away from in your life?" And that was, he goes, "If you leave now, you will run away from whatever irritates you for the rest of your life. Here's your opportunity to practice." And Risha, one other thing you said there that is it's not about being good. You can't be good at yoga.
Mm.
I sometimes say if you're good at yoga poses, good for you. Go get a job with Cirque du Soleil and hook us all up with some tickets, right? But at the end of the day, that line that he said about, what else are you running away from? When we're in a pose,
Mm.
any yoga posture, and yeah, like if its muscle is tight, or if our patience is really, we don't think we have a lot of patience, the easiest thing is to say, "Oh, I'll deal with it later," or "I'll deal with it tomorrow." But if you give it 1 second longer,
Mm.
that's the
Mm.
practice of patience. That
Mhm.
lays the
Mhm.
foundation to flexibility, not
Mm.
just in the body
Yeah.
but mind, right? And that's the funny thing is, like, we sometimes, "Oh, I should hold this pose longer."
Mm.
Not necessarily. But at the same time, there's also this flip side of, "Oh, well, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it." Tension doesn't feel good to me. A weak muscle doesn't feel good to me. Having low patience doesn't feel good. But
Mm.
I know that unless I deal with it, or
Mm.
unless I'm willing to feel those uncomfortable feelings,
Yeah.
I'll never move through. And that's what the whole point of when you're on the mat, and
Mm.
think about, you and whoever's listening, think about a pose or something you've done. Um, if you've practiced yoga before, that is very challenging and you don't necessarily like to do it,
Mm.
but all of a sudden you just say, "You know what? I'm going to give it 1 more second. I'm going to give it one deep breath. I'm going to soften my face and not look like I want to punch somebody in the face. I'm going to soften my face because I'm doing this as a gift to myself." Like
Mm.
people invest in a savings account. I am
Mm.
investing in myself.
Mm. Mm.
It's not to punish myself. It's an act of respect. It's an act of love.
Mm.
Of
Mm.
course, we're not thinking those things in that moment, but it's a moment opportunity to just take that deep breath in. 1 second longer writes a new ending to the story. It's been, again, I still practice that. I will practice that for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, it's so like it's simple, but it is at the same time difficult to implement. Like, I've seen situations that you're being hard on yourself, and that comes out. And here we're all in a shared space in that classroom, in that on that yoga mat, and we're all learning to be easy on ourselves, and how that creates to a beautiful shared experience.
and it matters. And that's the thing is, when you're in a room with different people, the one thing that we all can acknowledge as human beings is that, everyone is living their own lives and has their own life story. And again, sometimes the biggest smiles can hide the most pain. But
Yeah.
on that mat, when I walk into a classroom, Risha, I take a breath before I walk in, and
Mm.
I enter a space with an acknowledgement that every single person in that room is a human like myself. who has thoughts and feelings and insecurities and passions and
Mhm.
regrets and dreams. And rather than sit at home and worry about it or stress about it or make excuses, they've decided to get on
Mhm.
this yoga mat and for 1 hour practice breathing, practice moving, practice challenging themselves, and practice being kinder. And I say that one because it took many, many years for me. Like in the beginning, I couldn't look at myself in the
Mhm.
mirror for a long time because of judgments and expectations that were not at all realistic. But when you're in that space, you're taking that 1 hour and sharing space with other people that maybe have completely different lives, but you all have that awareness. Everyone in that room has that awareness of this is what I'm choosing to do for
Mhm.
myself because nothing will change if something doesn't change. And it doesn't have to be extreme. You mentioned it earlier. No, you don't have to go 6 times a week. You go once a week, you go once every 2 weeks. What's manageable,
Mhm.
right? And that's awesome.
Those are the aspects that has taken me years to experience. So yoga is teaching me that psychological safety for yourself first, and from that you create it within whatever environment you're in, and it's beautiful. So Michelle, how did you start feeling this connection more and more? And like you talked about your practice, your intention, this is something that leaders want to create even in the workplace, and there are some barriers. What would be your advice for those who want to create such psychological safety?
Okay. That's an excellent question. And I think of when I think of my corporate life, and then when
Mhm.
I think of my life
Mm,
being self-employed, it's the same concept is letting who you really are, like that part of, what is you, not just your professionalism or your poise, but
mm,
who you are as a person,
mm, mm,
allowing that to come out just a little bit. And I can give a little example of each. In my corporate life, I moved up relatively quickly, not because I'm a genius of any kind. If anything, I had less education than some of my colleagues.
mm,
But I remember one of my first bosses, because it was very clear. I was surprised that I was given a certain account to handle.
mm,
And he said, he goes, they feel at ease with you. They're comfortable with you because I knew what I had to do. I wasn't necessarily, oh, I'm the absolute best at this, but they got to know me enough
mm,
that
mm,
they could
mm,
trust me
mm,
and they felt comfortable working with me. So that worked to my advantage. Just the simple courage to be myself
mm,
as opposed to the role who I constructed as my professional self.
mm,
And
mm,
then same thing with actually this was a big one was when I first became a yoga teacher, there was this studio that I really wanted to teach it because I really admired the owner and director of the studio. He was someone who just lived his truth. Beautiful man. I love him to this day.
mm,
And he came to one of my classes because that's how we had to do practice classes. So at the end of, I had taught this class, I did everything what I thought was right. And then at the end of it, he asked, what are some qualities you really love about yourself that make you you?
mm,
And I said, one is I'm very honest
mm,
and direct. I said, two is that humor, because I just can't help it. It's just my grandmother was this way, my mom was this way, I'm this way. So definitely the humor. I said, and just exploring like the belief in the importance of what's possible. Just keeping the eyes, what's possible? There's a lot of stuff we can't do, but
mm,
what can we do?
mm,
And he nodded and he said, how come I didn't see that when you were teaching? And that was like mic drop moment. So he said, everything he goes in terms of the anatomy of the poses, the teaching, you got all that down, you have all
mm,
that, but what makes you you, and can you incorporate that,
mm, mm,
right? And yoga was pivotal in building the confidence to do that, right? So I noticed it helped me a little bit, open the door back in
mm,
my corporate life. And again, I just started practicing yoga then, but then as life evolved and my practice evolved, and then that realization came, and it comes that you'll get the message when you're ready to hear it, right?
mm, mm,
And then it's like, okay, well, wow. And I think if ever, I love that yourself. Like, that's what I like, where we connected in classes because we had open conversation. So we're polite and, you know, that sort of thing. But when you are willing to show, okay, who am I? Why, like, what do I love about doing this? What
mm.
because it's too much work to not be yourself. It's too
Yeah,
much effort
that's true.
and it's too frustrating. And to take that pressure off, it's like people will automatically feel more at ease when you're being you. And don't believe a word I say, by the way. You already know this. But it's like when it takes courage to put it into practice for,
Mm.
because sometimes it's like, oh, you're too much or that's not appropriate. Well, of course, be appropriate, but be you.
Yeah.
What is it that people love about you, and let that shine.
Yeah. I think that's what people start experiencing, that they're feeling stuck. But I think what is basically happening is that you're not being yourself. And I have been there. Like, I have changed my environments 3 or 4 times. Within India, I lived in like all different parts. And then I moved to Europe. I lived in Paris, Brussels, and Canada. So all those changes were starting to have an impact, because I felt like initially I could just kind of gel in, but I hadn't drilled down those aspects of my personality which I wanted to bring into the situation. And until I did that, I used to feel quite uncomfortable. My personality elements are fun, challenger, and empathetic. Those are the elements that I want to bring. And I wasn't being intentional. So now I have learned it the hard way, and that's what I'm trying to do. You're so right. Until you're clear about who you are and what you do, I mean, who you are comes first, and then what you do, then everything else becomes so much easier from there. No matter what level, what title, what role.
Doesn't matter what it says on your business card, right? And you nailed it, and you're doing it. Even, and if I may be, again, we're just being real here. I notice a difference in you from the time I first met you. Like
Thank you.
I observe it. It's not like anything drastic has changed, but it's almost like there's I feel that all those, the fun, the energetic, the empathetic, I feel that coming,
Okay.
and challenging. Like I love that. There's questions. It's not like just taking things at face value. There's questions. And Risha, I'm living proof,
Mhm.
honestly, about what happens when you do it the other way around. The reason I had the panic attacks was
Mm,
because I was not being myself at all. I was being
mm,
who I
mm,
thought I should be.
mm,
What
mm,
does this version of me look like? I was trying so hard to be that person who could impress bosses and even my own family that I got lost in there somewhere. And
mm,
then I noticed, when little by little, as I started to let more of the authentic out, then the panic attacks decreased. And funny enough, then opportunities in my professional life opened up.
mm, mm, mm,
Right. So it's fascinating how, when you literally just change the order of operations, how it works, and how understanding that it's progressively opening that door to more possibilities just by that willingness
mm,
to be authentic. Easy, that word is said a lot these days, but to just notice, if you're trying too hard to be something you're not,
mm, mm.
how it creates more blockages, as opposed to, okay, you know what? Am
Yeah.
I being who I am? And I love how you described it there about actually take it. And that's what happens when you pause and take some deep breaths. It's like, have you ever seen somebody get up, like walk into a room when they're late and just start talking, and they're like, blah, 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 as opposed to, you walk into a room, you take a deep breath, and then you speak.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
I think if we did that with ourselves sometimes, just pause, take a deep breath, and it's like, okay, where am I coming? Like, what is it that I want to show? What is it that I want to bring forward? It doesn't have to be a long 1 hour practice. It can take it could take 5 breaths, five quality seconds in one deep breath
mhm, mhm.
can be a game changer, right?
We talked about this, it's shared something that I always remember, that we have to first know what doesn't work in life sometimes to find out what does. And I just wonder, why is it so hard for some people to have that mind body connection in the first place itself? Like, sometimes, yes, probably due to our past experiences or whatever, then it's hard to move off that cycle you start. So it's incredibly painful and difficult at first. So what do you think, people who want to integrate yoga as a practice to deal with some of those signs, or just how they feel in general, what is the easiest place to start?
Being honest with yourself, number one, is understanding, you nailed it, Risha, that a
Mhm,
lot of we come from families with certain, we come from not just our families, but our communities, our environments, and
mhm,
we learn a certain way of being. And
mhm,
some of it is great and propels us forward in life, and some of it is not.
mhm, mhm,
Right. So it's taking that moment and saying, okay, I'm very grateful. I've learned a lot from a lot of people, including
Mm-hmm.
people I love and who love me and the
Mm-hmm.
environment in which I grew up. However, what doesn't work? And that begins the process. And the term I like to use is unlearning.
Mm.
I'm unlearning some things. I'm still unlearning some things. So
Yeah.
I think, at least from my perspective, to kind of see what am I avoiding? What do I not want to feel? Of course, no one wants to
Mm-hmm.
feel discomfort. But at the same time, if let's say, I'll give a good example just related to yoga. If let's say someone is always stiff in their shoulders and stiff in their back and they're walking around like Frankenstein, and it's like, oh, why is this happening? I've gone for a massage. I've done this. I've done that. But okay, well, what happens if maybe you start moving a little more regularly, even just sitting at your desk and rolling your shoulders and taking some deep breaths?
Mm-hmm.
Well, well, I didn't do that before. Well, what if you did it now? It's like, see what works. And if something, or someone gives advice, so you should try this type of class, and you tried, okay, that's not for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's kind of like learning, okay, what does work for me, but what is a story I've been telling myself to be true that isn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily true, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just keeping me stuck.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, and I'd love to say, oh, it's so easy, just do this. Oh no, it's sometimes a very uncomfortable pill to swallow of just, okay, in order for me to get through this, I have to feel some uncomfortable stuff. And sometimes we feel guilty, like, oh, but this is how, I can use my own example of, well, my mom taught me this. And then, years later, having a conversation with her, and, she's a very headstrong woman, and saying, Mom, like, that
Mm-hmm.
really didn't work. And she's like, oh, sorry. She's like, it worked for me. Right. And it was saying, like, it's not that it was wrong, it just didn't work for me. So I had to unlearn that behavior because it was just holding me back. What worked for her didn't work for me. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's some guilt associated with that. And sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
can't get that validation from people around us. We have to take it for ourselves. But yeah, it's just that willingness to take a deep breath in and saying, okay, what's not working? And you know, what am I avoiding feeling? I'd say that's a huge thing. I even say, even if I start to get internally critical or I start to get really pessimistic, I pause and say, what am I avoiding feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can be honest with yourself with that question, that helps open the door. And it's like, okay, who says I have to behave this way or have to think or do this way? If it's clearly not working, then that's fine. But sometimes it's feeling that discomfort associated with it to move past.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge really is power, right? It's just knowledge is power.
I used to be very critical about India, in general, and that was such a colored view that I used to only look at the bad things that were not working, and it took a lot of time for me to unlearn and see the good things that come from my background and to accept that and to be proud of that. All the things that we need to unlearn now, being honest with ourselves constantly. That class going there is like my way of making sure that I'm not avoiding feeling something now. And
Awesome.
that's what brings me to that class. I just realized that as you were speaking, that's probably what brings me there, to know that I'm not avoiding anything.
I
So
love
that's
that.
so
And you know
powerful.
what? What you just said just reminded me again, another game changer moment was, I remember being at a class years and years ago, and this person came in, and the teacher was very patient, just listening to them speak. And this lady was saying, okay, well, just so you know, and she started to talk about all of her challenges. I have
Mm,
this in my left shoulder. My left leg is this. I get really agitated if this happens. And she just kept going on and on. In my mind, I'm just rolling my eyes. What really struck me was the way the teacher was just gently listening to her with a very compassionate face.
mm,
And when she finished her tirade of all her laundry list of problems,
mm,
he let a space pass and he said, is that everything? And she's
mm.
like, yeah, that's it. And he's like, now that you've put all that energy into telling me what you can't do, how about you spend the rest of your time here focusing on what you can? And I
Yeah.
saw her face change. Maybe and it was one of those moments of, oh, wow, how much energy are we putting into focusing on what's not going well or what we're not doing, as opposed to, okay, it's not like flip again. It's not like we can turn it off like a light switch. It's a moment to moment practice, but instead of focusing on what I can't do or what's not working, can I focus on what is and build on that? And sometimes, again, it's having those uncomfortable feelings and just breathing anyway. Just breathe anyway. I
Yeah.
tell myself that several times a day, especially if I get upset or I get angry or frustrated. And it's like, it's life is going to go on. I have to get through this. I can either fight and feel terrible all the time or just say, breathe anyway.
Mm.
Focusing on what I can do. What is good about this?
It's a game changer, really, having that mindset. Because yes, earlier my perception was I'm not good at yoga, and now I know that, hey, these are the poses that I enjoy, that I'm kind of naturally good at. And surprisingly, pigeon's pose is one of them. What I do is, if I don't have time for a lot of let's say yoga, I try to make time for that when I'm feeling that tension, because I remember specifically that you mentioned that helps you release that stress. That was to me, like, I started noticing things that I'm good at within yoga, and that's helping me stretch a little bit more, when even in the things that I'm not good at.
And all it is because you're willing to have the experience. That's it. You're
Yeah.
willing to just practice it. And I think a lot of times we sometimes avoid that, or again,
Mhm.
making it not enough. And I look at it, it's kind of like even 1 second in a pose is better
Yeah.
than zero
Yeah.
seconds, right?
I didn't know how time flew by, Michelle. And that's what happens when, two people who absolutely love yoga can talk about it. So before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share, with the people listening? Once they start, what can they do to sustain it?
I wish we had a lot longer as well. Oh, life obligations, eh? But that's okay. We're here now in this moment. And thank you for that question. Hmm. The time is now. Everything matters, meaning there's no such thing as, again, I look at it like if you have a savings account and, oh, I only have 1 cent. Okay, well, if you put a cent in today and a cent in tomorrow and a cent in 10 years, it's going to keep growing. Nobody has enough time. Everyone is busy. We know this.
Mhm.
But it's kind of really acknowledging, okay, I have 24 hours in my day. How can I invest a little bit of that in myself? So, again, something as simple as, okay, once an hour, or even, you know what, at lunchtime, even no matter how busy you are, how many obligations you have in or out of the office,
Mhm.
pausing to take a deep breath, because nothing matters if you're not breathing, right? So taking that moment to breathe and clear and just taking one step forward. Blows my mind how sometimes people will just, it's like looking across the street. Oh, I wish I could be there. Oh, life would be so much better if I got there. Well, then take one step,
One step.
even if it's the smallest step, because it will propel you forward. Not
Mm.
maybe or hopefully. No,
Mhm.
every step, one deep breath, one conscious deep breath is better than zero. Right.
Wow, love it. I mean,
Awesome.
invest in yourself, and every step counts. This has been so wonderful. I hope this gives people of something to start with. If yoga is not a part of your life, if it is, awesome. Because what I really love about it is that power that I can create psychological safety for myself and others, regardless of what environment I'm in. And it's something I wish I knew
Yeah,
before.
well, nothing happens on your mat without your consent. That's the
Yeah.
beautiful thing, is no matter what's going on in life, when you are standing on that yoga mat, whatever you think of yourself in regards to yoga, about, oh, I can do this, I can't, doesn't matter. On that mat, nothing happens without your consent. Nothing. So that in itself is worth at least giving it a shot to see. It's like the only thing I have to do on this mat is breathe. Everything else is a bonus, but I don't have to do anything. And
Yeah.
that is a practice. That's how we build that power, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. But that's your space.
This is so lovely, Michelle. Thank you so much for making the time.
You are most welcome. And anytime you want to have another conversation, I would be happy to come back. This is wonderful what you're doing, and wishing all the best to everyone, and to have as much joy, and always remembering possibilities are out there. And I think it's, you remind me, everyone I meet reminds me. So thank you for being my teacher as well, Risha. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. You always say that. Thank you. I love that as well. We're all each other's teachers.